Okay, welcome everybody to the GIA Knowledge Sessions, a series of talks and seminars about gemology fueled by our decades of research. At GIA, we're really fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to spend our lives studying gemstones and learning about gemstones. And it's part of our mission to share everything we know about these gemstones with you. And so I'm excited to kick things off today. I'm Aaron Palkey. I'm a member of the research team here at GIA. I'm filling in for Kelly Giordano, who would ordinarily do these webinars. And I'm joined by Robert Weldon, the director of the RT Liticote Gemological Library here at GIA. And actually, I just want to say I'm just as excited as you guys to hear what Robert has to say. I've admired Robert's photos for many years, and I've had the opportunity to go out in the field with Robert and watch him coax magnificent photos of gemstones using very rudimentary and simple systems. And so I think Robert has a lot of good knowledge and tips to give us on how to make our photographs better. So before we get to that though, there's just a little bit of housekeeping. So everyone attending this is automatically muted. If you have a question, please go ahead and submit it using the Q&A feature that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask questions as we go, and we'll accumulate the questions, and we'll have some time at the end of Robert's talk to go over some of the questions and hear Robert's answers and thoughts on that. We'll also be sending a recording of the session to you later today, and that message will also have a survey. If you have time, we would love to have your feedback with this survey to hear what we can do better with these webinars. And with that, without taking up any more time, I'm going to pass it over to Robert, and let's see what he has to tell us.
All right. First of all, thank you, Dr. Palkey, Aaron. I really appreciate your kind introduction, and thanks also for mentioning the GIA library. I can say without reservation, it's one of the most important gemological libraries in the world, and I'm humbled to be part of it. So much knowledge pertaining to gemology and jewelry live within those four walls at the very heart of GIA. We are a special library that serves our students, teachers, laboratory researchers, academics, staff. We also answer gem and jewelry related questions from around the world. Our materials range from periodicals in multiple languages, geological maps, books on geology, mineralogy, gemology faceting, jewelry design, history, you name it. Much, much more than that. Now, to do all of this, I'm very proud of our incredible staff, real subject matter experts in gemology and geology and all of those sciences. Unfortunately, we've been torn apart because of COVID-19. So we hasten the day where we can all be together again amongst those books and magazines and images. There's so much work to be done. We also have now merged with the GIA Museum and Gem Kids. And I'm excited about the synergy that will come out of our combined efforts. Much of that has already occurred naturally in the past. Many of you know we're in the midst of a major effort to digitize our incredible rare book collection and to share that with everyone around the globe for free. Now, you can see a link to that here below. We're also a major producer of photographs and articles, but many of the images that you see in this presentation were photographed in the library studio. These images then enter our course material, illustrate our peer-reviewed journal, Gems and Gemology, and also enter GIA's marketing and website. So the library's footprint is indelible. Now, without further ado, let's look at how gem, mineral, and jewelry images are made. And by the way, to all of you who are attending on the far corners of the earth and had to get up at 3 in the morning to hear this, I hope you don't fall asleep. I hope you have coffee by your side and that all is well. I think you'll enjoy it. So let's start with this quote. I don't trust words, I trust pictures. Well, that's true, although in this digitized world, it's important to know that you can't always trust pictures either. Pictures can be manipulated, and I am a purist in the sense that we all use Photoshop. Everything has to go through Photoshop, but I think it's very important that we maintain fidelity with what we are photographing, really try to keep it as much as possible just about the gem and what we are photographing. It's very, very important. If we use Photoshop, it's to adjust color to make it much more close to what it should look like, and also to remove dust and things like that. Now, I've been told by very sage people that it's important never to start a talk with a picture of a toad or a frog, but I'm going to do so anyway. But what a toad. This is the queen of toads, one of the most remarkable carvings I've ever seen in my life. It's by Gerd Dreyer. It's cut and fashioned in 2016. What is amazing about it is that in this image, it really encapsulates everything that a photographer is trying to do. You're trying to show texture. You're trying to show color. You're using light to, in this particular case, just rake off the side of the toad there to the right, where you can see sort of this glistening effect of a humid toad emerging from a bush somewhere. But this is rock. This is an amazing gemstone, all tourmaline, all one stone, ranging from green to blue. And when the cutter actually faceted it, carved it, they were able to discover that that blue actually existed in the cap part of the tourmaline. Before then, they didn't realize that there was a blue color. So my job as a photographer was really to try to show that this range of colors, this texture, this amazing focus from the eyes of the toad all existed in one piece. So to do that, we need tools. And to do that, you're going to need tools. So what are those? Obviously, we're going to talk about cameras, right? But the most important instrument that we have are our eyes. This is true for gemology. And so I urge you, when you start taking pictures, really look at what you're about to photograph very critically. If it's a phenomenal stone, how are you going to show the phenomena? If it's a faceted gem, how are you going to make sure that it's not just about translucency, but where you're also showing the color of the piece and accurately? Now, this is the phone that we always have with us, but to be quite honest with you, this talk is not going to be about iPhone photography, though I will tell you that I have written about it. I briefly flirted with iPhone and other types of photography in the past, and what I found is that it really didn't hold up to the standard that I needed for photography. These are the types of cameras that I use. It really doesn't matter what brand you ultimately decide to choose. They're all excellent and fantastic. There are mirrorless cameras off to the right, which is the new way of photographing gem materials through a mirrorless system, and also digital SLR, which you see there to the left. I use a Nikon D850, which gives me great fidelity and color, and I absolutely love the camera. It also has sort of a mirrorless feature that you can use if you don't want shutter vibration. In some occasions, it really comes in handy. In terms of lenses, these are two of the ones that I use. The 105 micro Nikkor at the bottom is, I use, I'd say 90% of the time. The 150, which you see here, is a little bit of a longer lens, more of a telephoto. So it gives you a little bit more working distance between yourself and the subject. And it works very well. In terms of the studio itself, the environment, the area where I'm taking the pictures, there are many ways to go. You can use a box very much like this one, and those work fine. I've used it in the past. I don't use it very much anymore. That particular one has a rotating base in the center where you can take short videos also of the images you're taking. What you're seeing in the center of that stage is a gray card, or a card that helps you adjust color. a color profile that will confirm the fidelity of color in your gemstones or what you're photographing, because as you change the color temperature of light, you're also changing very much the way a gemstone looks. You want to make sure that it looks as normal as possible, like how we adjust the color when we look at a gem in our hands. You can get those at any particular photo supply store. This is really more like the studio that I use. It has a lot of open space. Definitely you need a tripod. That's very important for long exposures, so you don't have vibration. And this is a very large table, which allows me to take pictures of fairly large mineral specimens. In terms of lighting, here you go. This is actually the system that I use at GIA. It's a fantastic system, ProPhoto. It has both incandescent lights as a quartz halogen modeling light, but also the flash unit. So you can actually see what you're going to photograph. You take a picture and the flash comes on, and that's the exposure. So it's really, really fantastic. These are continuous lighting systems right here, which are both LED and quartz halogen in this case. I don't think they're making these as much anymore, just simply because they get incredibly hot, and I have burns under my arms to testify to that when I used to take pictures in the past years and years ago. Very, very hot, and sometimes they fall over, so there's fire danger. Today with LED, cool lights, and with strobes, you really don't have to worry about that as much. Now, this is very important. It's important because we don't really photograph in direct lighting. We must diffuse the light in most cases. Now, there are certain instances where some direct lighting is needed. If you think back to that picture of the toad, I had a mixture of both diffused light to show the color and some of the texture in the front of the toad. And then I was raking direct light from the back to bring out the strength of the color, but also that sort of shiny, glistening effect that you see, often used in combination also for pictures of diamonds. Now, these diffused systems can either be the soft boxes that you see there in the large picture to the left. You can use plexiglass panels like these, or you can use umbrellas. This particular umbrella has a silver interior. You're basically bouncing light off of the center of the umbrella onto your subject matter. And these all work as interesting diffusion systems. So, speaking about diffusion, let's take a look at this stone. Here's an amethyst. If you were to look at it in direct sunlight, like I did here, you would think that'd be the best way, but it isn't. You get little spots of very strong color and light, but you also get many areas of darkness because the light is not spreading evenly within the stone. So as we look at gemstones, very similar to that as gemologists, so too must we look at how we light a stone. So if we take that same stone into an open shade area, begin to see a lot better configuration of the facets, stronger areas and larger chunks of color, we get a better sense of what that gemstone is like. So that's what we must do in the studio as well. Now, the studio that I use, remember that table that I showed you, it looks a little bit like this, where you have the camera at the bottom. It's a three-point lighting system. There's the lights, and you see these little blue areas right here. These are the diffusers. The diffusers allow us to get very good color and a nice black and area of contrast within the gemstone that we all look for. Now, odds and ends in the studio, yeah, that's an important part of it, very, very important. And I can tell you that the first thing that any gemologist must do is clean the stone. We must do the same in the studio. We use tweezers to hold stones and put them on our stage. Now this picture to the far right shows everything that I use in the studio. I have the glass cleaner, because I'm photographing on glass. In fact, this image here was taken on glass. I can use that glass cleaner to clean my surface. The quake hold, which you can see right here, allows things to stay firm. Now, obviously, you don't want something like that behind a transparent gem because you'll see it through the stone. Luckily for gemstone photographs, it's very nice because with gemstone photographs, you can just rest them on their pavilion and then angle the camera in such a way as you're looking perpendicular to the table right through the stone to its culet. The brushes here help us remove dust and so forth. Here's dust off for larger chunks of dust. Make sure that the gemstone is not on the table when you use it, or you're going to blow it right off the table. Yes, it's happened to me, but let's not talk about that right now. Okay, let's talk about positioning the stone and lighting it a little bit. So you'll see that in this video here. Dark stage, you turn on the left light and it lights the right side of the stone. That allows you to then bring the picture into focus. Then you turn on the right light and you're more or less balancing out the color. Remember, again, to that 3-point lighting system. There's a little bit of glare on the table that I'm not terribly happy about right here, but I turn on the backlight and that helps giving me a little bit of a shadow here because I don't like the floating in air effect. And then as I ponder this, I realize I can move the stone. I can just nudge it slightly until that glare on the table is gone. And now I'm ready to take my photograph. Now, in order for all of these photographs to look sharp, we have to understand the very basics of depth of field. Now, as we look at a lens, we'll see that the aperture on this particular, the iris or diaphragm on this lens is wide open to f8. Here it's a little bit closed to f11 and even smaller at f22. As you close the aperture on your lens, you get a much greater depth of field. So your area of focus, your depth of focus will actually be wider. Why is that important? Because when we photograph a gemstone, and let's look at this video, I think you'll see it there. Here you're looking at the table, very small table. This is a gemstone cut by Mark Gronlund. But as you begin to close your aperture, things are coming into focus in the pavilion area of the stone. And it's getting absolutely sharper, sharper, and sharper as you close down your f-stone. This is what you want for the most part. You want sharpness from the table to the culet as much as possible. And just to drive the point home, because sometimes videos don't really show it very well, here we have a wide open aperture on that same mascot, the amethyst we were looking at earlier. Here we have it at around f11. And then we close it down further and it sharpens all the way to the end of the culet. This is where I'm going to take my picture and we'll move on. All right, let's talk a little bit about photographing mineral specimens. Yes, it is about observing and seeing things, and it really is about how you interpret what you see that is so important. So when you look at a mineral specimen, and they are the most challenging of items to photograph in our business, there's so much you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of the morphology of the crystal faces. You need to be aware of their inclusions and what angles you want to use to maybe avoid focusing on those too much. You want to understand their translucency and color, all of those things. So I'd like to show you these two diamonds. I photographed these in Antwerp for a story we were doing about the Letseng diamond mine in the mountain kingdom of Lesotho. We had been to the mine, we photographed some rough there, but then we went to Antwerp to really photograph the big stuff. And when I talk about big stuff, this was the big stuff. I'll never forget it. One of the principals at Gem Diamonds walked over to me when I was setting up my cameras. He says, you know, I really wish I could have brought you a 300 carat stone, but instead I'm going to bring you this 299.35 carat stone. Probably the largest I've photographed for sure. An amazing piece. And I love the fact that this was sort of a modified octahedron, tortured on its way through its journey towards the surface of the Earth. Incredible morphology, beautiful color, and the stone on the right, no slouch either. Very typical of the types of stones that are produced there. Now, I had the chance when I was there to just photograph the surface of that large diamond without a microscope, and this is what it looked like. I had great control over depth of field. I could have sharpness from edge to edge. It was just an incredible chance to photograph that stone. So looking at this one, again, you remember we're trying to show transparency and at the same time surface structure. Now this is no small stone either. The diamond on the right's 50 carats and a perfect octahedron that I photographed at the DTC in Botswana. Very nice. This particular one was challenging because how do you show surface features, those incredible trigons that you see there, but at the same time show that it's an absolutely clean stone. Now you can see that here because I decided to light only one of the surfaces and leave the other surfaces free from reflected light so that we could see through them and really understand the transparency of the stone. And this particular smaller octahedron, also a perfect octahedron there, basically the same principles apply. This is a 3-carater, this is a 50-carater. The other area that helps you see transparency is this shadow here, where you're also seeing what is happening as you light the stone. There's an area of light through the shadow that appears. That helps give you the illusion, the sense that this is a transparent stone. Now this is an absolutely stunning video, a stunning ruby that I photographed recently. This is the first photograph I took of it. It's about 4 inches high. It's from Burma with a wonderful chunk of calcite attached. What I wanted to show here is the morphology of the stone, but unfortunately what I was not seeing was the color. So by adding a light behind the crystal, right here, you begin to see color a little more effectively. That's really a spectacular color that you're looking at right there. And it also speaks to the transparency of that stone. Now, what I was troubled about here is that this crystal of calcite rather blended with the background. So I thought maybe I need to have a slightly darker background, but still have the one light illuminating the surface, the other light in back, giving you a sense of color and transparency. And I did that on a darker background. So that's what we have here. Now we have a little more contrast with that incredible piece of calcite. Okay, is this not just absolutely amazing? It is. Cinderella's Carriage is a piece that Bill Larson owns. It's absolutely stunning. It's a pseudomorph in quartz. You see the amethyst driver of the carriage right here. This is maybe Cinderella, I'm not sure. Someone's ready to bolt from that carriage. This is a pseudomorph, and what was inside has been etched and dissolved, and this is a hollow space that is left behind. Here are the horses ready to take off. This was a challenge because I needed to photograph not only to show the color of the amethyst against the white rock crystal quartz, but also the fantastic druzy that was all the way through it. And at the same time, to show shape and dimension of these white areas was very challenging because they're white. They reflect very highly, and especially if you're trying to combine that with what you're seeing here, it was a challenge to photograph. Not an incredible piece. These were photographed at the Natural History Museum in LA. There's a rhodochrosite from the Sweet Home mine right there. That one stands about 6 inches tall. Absolutely one of the best pieces I've ever seen. They look like blocks that are barely perched upon one another. Here again, you know, I wanted to show color, the incredible, unmistakable color of the Sweet Home rhodochrosite. Also the morphology that you see right here. And actually in Photoshop, I had to remove a glued on base that was here. So I didn't like the way the base looked, so I removed it in Photoshop and created a whole new background. That's what you can use Photoshop for. This picture right here is of a bonitoite, which is the California state gem. Hooray, hooray. Also photographed with a cut stone of bonitoite along with it. Fantastic piece. I've never seen a crystal specimen like this. They call it the bridge because it literally, you know, loops over itself and rests perfectly on the glass as you're ready to photograph it. Now, there are interesting situations where you may need to apply gemological expertise and know-how to how you're photographing the gems. If you look at that rutilated star quartz from Brazil, you realize it's just a very difficult item to photograph because there was a thick layer of rock crystal quartz on top of those rutile needles. You can see that in the reflections here. However, when I tried to photograph it directly in the studio, I needed to use strong lights to really light up these star effects. What resulted was these horrible reflections on the side of the stone everywhere on that particular piece. And it was very annoying. And I really didn't want to do too much Photoshop work with it and spoil the picture. And you start changing things too much. So I took the stone and I submerged it in water. The surface of the water and the quartz minimized the reflections, still gave me some of them, but minimized them. So I was able to see more as to what was happening within the stone. So basically I used one light for this picture, and I only used one light for this iris agate that you see here. And that light was behind the iris agate. You have to understand, most iris agates are cut in a very, very thin manner, almost paper thin. And that allows you to see the iris effect to a greater degree. My challenge here was to show all of the iris colors all around the iris, but at the same time, the small little bits of druzy that you see through the stone. And then, of course, you have interesting situations like change of color stones. Now, this is Turkish diaspore that you see here. I did photograph these in two different kinds of light, a daylight equivalent, and then also an incandescent equivalent kind of light, where I got the beginnings of the color that I was seeing in that particular wonderful twinned piece, but they weren't exact. So I used Photoshop to really bring those colors up to the point where they really were replicating what I was seeing in terms of the color change. Every once in a while, you'll get an amazing, amazing piece to photograph. And this I shot at Tucson. A gentleman from Ethiopia, Mr. Teferi, showed up at my studio in Tucson and said, I have this item for you to photograph for GIA. And I was so exhausted. It was the end of the day, and I couldn't believe it. He pulled out this thing. It was 3.6 kilos, huge. I very rarely photograph anything with tweezers in it or a loop, just because I think it looks tacky. But in this case, man, to show that size of this incredible opal from this Wello opal from Ethiopia is there. And it had this incredible band of color. I'm not going to show you in this particular presentation, but I think it is in G&G. This whole area, there was a belt of incredible play of color throughout the stone. Pretty amazing. Woke me right up too. I was exhausted, but all of a sudden I was all energized photographing this fabulous piece. Okay, and here we have another carving from Gerhard Dreyer. Amazing. This looks good, right? Well, I think so. But let me tell you what I didn't like about this picture. First of all, this is a beryl. It's I think a Ukrainian beryl that shows both the morganite and the green beryl together. It looks nice, but you're not seeing much detail. Yeah, some of the fur, you're seeing some of that. Also, I think I cropped in too close. I wanted to see more translucency in the ears. Somehow this sapphire, which is what was inlaid into this carving to form the eye, is not visible. So I took another picture and I used direct lighting. Remember when I say it's important to diffuse? This picture was taken all in diffused. This was a mixture of diffused and direct light. In this case, you can see from the shadow, the direct light was directly behind me or in front of me. So behind the item. That lit up the entire piece of beryl, showed me better color in the eyes, definitely increased the translucency of the ears. I was seeing more detail in the fists and the paws of that little mouse, and just amazing piece. And I also pulled back a little bit to give our art directors a little more margin for cropping a picture for an article that we were writing. This is something I photographed just 3 or 4 days ago. Amazing piece. This is labradorite, and it is painted on the surface by this incredible artist, Valentina Fetiskova. And it's just such a magnificent piece. But you know, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, yeah, great. That's labradorite, fantastic. Okay, it sort of looks like labradorite, but where is the labradorescence? So I took another shot to show the labradorescence, and there it is, pure magic. All that you see is in how you illuminate a piece. And how you illuminate a piece is really gemological. It's what we do every day to show aventurescence, to show labradorescence in this case. And here the combination was just magic, absolute magic. Then you have tricky colors. This is an emerald specimen, just unbelievable. It's about the size of my fist. On the left, this particular emerald is from Cosquez in Colombia. And then you see the smaller specimens of very translucent, very light colored emeralds from Chivor, also in Colombia. Chivor is known for its lighter colors, their translucency, the actual quality of the crystal tends to be better. There's a little less saturation and they tend towards blue. Now, if you look at these two, the Cosquez one tends a little towards yellowish green, very minute amount of yellow, but just a tiny bit. Muzo tend to be tend towards a purer green than Cosquez. In this picture, you're able to see them both. You're able to really understand what it is that creates the distinction between those two localities along the Emerald Belt in Colombia. I don't think there's anything more to say about these. Beautiful though. And this one is, this was in a recent issue of Gems and Gemology. And here we combined mineral and cut gemstone photography. And this is very challenging. I used a stacking system in Photoshop in order to achieve, sharpness from this end to this end, or from this end to that end. basically a series of, I think, 3 pictures. I think that's all it needed. And then merged together to have a greater depth of field from one end of the picture to the other. And here showing the incredible range of colors for sapphire. All right, now in photographing gems, we go through many of the same machinations. This is, for me, emblematic of what I try to achieve in a gemstone. This was made easier for me by the incredible faceting of Viktor Tuzlukov. He is truly a master, and this was a truly magnificent salvarite, the green grossular garnet. It's also 118 carats, I believe, very large, so easy enough to compose. But what I was finding is that the depth of the stone was such that it was very challenging to photograph. I didn't want to get too many reflections along the side facets, but some, so that you begin to understand how great Viktor is. And at the same time, look through the stone towards its culet right there, which just comes to an incredible point, where I could have a mix of lighting from light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, all through the stone, and some contrast there to really accentuate the magnificence of it. Oh, yes, and that particular stone, the savarite, I photographed dead on, so 90 degrees perpendicular to the direction of the lens, looking through the lens of the camera. But not everything is photographed that way. You know, on occasion, I do have to tilt things just a little bit to make it work better. In the case of the Elizabeth Taylor diamond, the 33-carat diamond that you see there, the emerald cut, it was just a matter of tilting it slightly to achieve that incredible step cut effect throughout the stone, and at the same time capture some of its fire. Beautiful, incredible piece that made my heart beat when I was photographing it. And there on the right, you're seeing too that I've tilted these tourmalines a little bit to capture the color throughout the stone, and also the color zoning in this particular piece right here. Amazing pieces of tourmaline. Now this is a photograph, the only one in here that was taken by my wife, but I wanted to show it because it's such a darn good photo, and at the same time, it shows what I wanted to show with regards to backgrounds. These are a suite of desert sun sunstones, fantastic material, and beautiful deep red color for that material. Is very hard to find anything like that. These all came out of one piece of rough. And so we wanted to show what they looked like as a collection, or also wanted to show that. And then also as a collection on dark. So you have light and dark. Both of these images were presented to the owners of the stone. They tend to like the dark version more. What I wanted to tell you is that's really a matter of your choice. I like the one on the light background in this particular case. I'm seeing more of the color, I'm seeing more of the faceting, at least in my eye. I do like the fact that, see, there was a little bit of glare on this table, and here Orasa moved the stone just slightly to create a much deeper effect in the color of the stone right here. Some of the areas of green zoning that you see in this particular stone were softened a little bit by photographing them on a darker background. And then it's important when you have something of significance to really document it as best you can. So we had a very big diamond in-house and had a chance to photograph it, a nice big round. I photographed it from every conceivable angle, including one you don't see here, which showed the hearts and arrows patterns. Now that's an absolutely stunning diamond. This one I wanted to show the absolutely gorgeous scintillation, like a chandelier of light. Just fantastic the way it looked. I photographed it, I thought I was done. And then Terry Ottaway, who is the director of the museum that I'm now working with, and have been for years, said to me, you know, that's nice. I like the fire, it's kind of fun, but I don't really see the faceting, the beautiful faceting of the piece. So I took another picture. This is the same stone, believe it or not, to show what the faceting looked like. It's also a deflawless, and you can see that here. You wouldn't have been able to see it in the picture on the left. Which one do I like better? I don't know. To me, they both represent the stone for different reasons accurately. Now, these are some diamonds that I photographed recently for Mr. Bronstein here, who just has the most amazing collection of fancy colored diamonds. You probably all know about the butterfly. That's an important piece collection, 240 stones. This is not part of it, these stones right here. But the colors are just so incredible. You have this fancy, intense green diamond to the left, and that almost pinkish orange, like we want to call it a Padparasha diamond on the right. Really fantastic. Now, I'm not going to have a section on backgrounds or props. This is really something I think that you all need to decide on your own. Backgrounds work for different reasons. This tanzanite you see to the left was on a piece of very undulated glass that gave us almost this watery effect, which is what I wanted to show. This is kind of the hint or the message I wanted to show with that stone, is how transparent it was, how incredibly blue it was. Just an incredible faceting job by David Brackner. And Mark Bronlund, there in the center, had that citrine that you see. And that one was not propped up there amongst the quartzes, but I photographed the quartzes separately and then the stone and brought the two together in Photoshop. You can be daring, but not that daring. And those sharp edges of the quartz would easily scratch the citrine. And then here to the right, Glenn Preuss is the cutter of that stone. I just love that stone. It's a spectacular sapphire, which shows this fantastic little nest of needles to the top left there. In this case, I really wanted to show those. This is a natural stone. It's not been treated. You need to celebrate that. You need to celebrate inclusions. And this is what my way of doing that as a photographer. Now, this is an agate from the Deccan Plains in India. Just unbelievable. It almost looks like a turkey or something. Fantastic that I had a chance to photograph. This is about 3 inches across, very large. So I propped this up, and then I used only one light to show the dendritic patterns that you see there, and that wonderful iron oxide staining that goes throughout the stone. So you don't always need 3 lights. It can be just one. It's basically what the stone needs. The stone needs to speak to you and tell you what it needs. And as we look at a piece like this and hold it up to the sun and we see everything we want to see, we realize we need only one light. It could be the sun, or in this case, one studio light. Oh, I wanted to show you this because I photographed this very early on in my career as a photographer. I think this was photographed. Indian dealer, and unfortunately I do not remember his name, brought this to me and he said, "Isn't this amazing? The cutter actually celebrated the inclusions." And I looked at it and I went, it is amazing, absolutely stunning to see that spray of pyrites just like a waterfall, just going right through the stone. And I have to tell you, I so appreciate a cutter that does not cut that away, that actually shows it as something significant and unusual in an emerald. I've never seen another emerald like it, except for the one on the right, which is a rough piece that Tom Schneider had. And That's probably the type of rough that was used to cut that stone. Now, as you start looking at pictures, again, another carving, but this one by Patrick Dreher, you need to start thinking about how you need to illuminate things. So, luckily for me, this shell was sort of a muted, not a shiny finish on it, very much like a shell in natural, on a natural snail would be. But the rest of this agate was highly polished to really bring out that glistening effect. Now, as you study pictures like this, you can analyze the types of backgrounds that were used. You can analyze how many lights were used. You can count the actual light spots in the rounded areas. You can see how the lights were used to show the undulating patterns and the actual texture in the stone. There's a lot that a picture will tell you just simply by looking at it. And I think that's where you all need to go as much as you can when you look at pictures. They will teach you. Now, speaking about teaching, I have to thank the mentors that I have had. And, you know, I never asked them to show me exactly what they did, but Tino Hamid, the Van Pelts, Guy Hall, Bart Curran, so many others, fantastic photographers in their own ways, would give me a tip here and there that was just exactly what I needed to help complete a thing. I think as photographers, we hold on to some of these secrets just because we don't want everybody to look the same. So I urge you too to use lights, to use backgrounds, to use textures and everything that you do in your own way to help bring out your own type of signature. And I think mentoring is good. So if you have a chance to tell someone how to do something, I think it's important. Now, phenomenal stones are a little more challenging. In this case, I used one area of pinpointed light. I think it was a fiber optic light to show the star effect, the asterism. But then I decided this is such a cool stone, obviously a natural sapphire, but you could really determine that by seeing the angularity, the hexagonal structure in the back of the stone. So I just documented that for fun. Other types of phenomena like cat's eye, very much the same way. You would use a pinpointed light source to bring out the cat's eye. And in the case of the color change, you use different colors of light to try to affect the stone as best as possible. And then Photoshop has to be used in conjunction with that to help bring it to what those color changes really look like to us in the lights that we use. It's not always possible to get the colors exact. So I think Photoshop really does help in a situation like that to bring it to where it should be, but not any further. Because if you go any further, you're really showing the stone for something that it is not. I think that's important. Play of color is one of those amazing things too. I love this stone so much. Those characters in the back of the material here, just scenes that come out of it are just amazing. In many cases, I use direct lighting for lighting up opals, but in this case, it wasn't necessary. A very nice diffused light really helped bring out all of the colors. The direct light would blow out this color too much, blow out this color too much, and I wouldn't be able to see the detail that I normally see in this particular stone. And pearls, you know, pearls have their own built-in phenomenon, and I really like it as well. These soft pearls that you see here are very difficult to photograph because they're so uniform and because they're spherical, so they're reflecting everything in the room. So it's how you diffuse the light that really counts there. Here, the diffusion and the way the light spread amongst the pearls themselves helped light each other up. So the light from here was lighting this one, this stone was lighting this particular pearl, and so forth. Oh, this is an incredible piece that I photographed recently. It's a fire obsidian, comes from Oregon. Absolutely incredible colors. This is very, very, very challenging to photograph. It's highly directional in terms of how the stone is viewed, how you view it, how the light shines on it, how you tilt the stone. Everything has to move until this effect, this iridescence that you see here, comes forward. It's really quite spectacular. It's a very, very thin layer of almost like an oil on water effect that you would see, you know, in a puddle somewhere. Spectacular material, and it's unique to this locality. Photographing jewelry, it's very much the same. Here I had a challenge because I had the soft nature of the pearls, but I also had the play of color in the opal that I wanted to show, and this whole line of diamonds. We really trying to light everything, and sometimes you have to compromise for the diamonds to light up the opal, or compromise for the opal to light up the pearls. So in this case, I photographed it twice, once really for these pearls, and then once for this particular piece right here, to show the play of color and to show the whiteness of those diamonds. Choices of background, they can be anything. You can put them on a pile of books like you see there. This was a rock that we had in the museum that I put those rough pieces on because we were doing a story about diamonds in the rough in the field, and we wanted to show sort of a natural effect. I don't think we ever used that photo though. And then here, this whole series of butterflies that are from rare materials like rhodochrosite and spinel and sphene and pearls from Baja. To me, the less distraction that there is, there's enough distraction in the pieces themselves. And remember, what you're photographing, the gems you're photographing, that is your focus. In this picture right here, it is the focus, but it's kind of distracting. Same here, but I still like that a lot. Here, you know what you're looking at. There's no ambiguity. You're looking at those incredible butterflies. Sometimes colors work together so well. This is an antique bronze that belonged to my mom, and I photographed these with Alan Friedman's unbelievable moonstone necklace. That is the adulorescence I was seeing in those, just heart-stoppingly beautiful, and it's probably the only $1 million necklace that I know of in moonstone. These were set in gold and then backed with ebony to really bring out the adulorescence. And my wife wore it briefly to just try it on, and she said, "Wow, I really like that." And I said, "Yeah, but you can't have it." Yeah, I'm mean that way. All right, talking about moonstones, I think moonstones tend to photograph better if they're on darker backgrounds. Now, this is an amazing pair of earrings with very large diamonds, about 4.5 carat each, and 13 carats worth of moonstone. Fantastic. Oh yeah, how about this piece? When I was asked by the museum to photograph this for one of the museum's exhibits at GIA on Dreams of Diamond, it's just amazingly difficult, because how do you photograph a piece that's, I don't know, 4 or 5 meters long? Something that contains, 7,241 cut stones, 404 rough crystals. And how do you do it justice? How do you, and all of these little pendants that were hanging here were directional, and so twisting them and turning them to have them appear correctly was very, very challenging. I know that these were worn by an actress, and unfortunately I can't think of her name. I think it's there at the top of the title slide. But what is amazing by it is that I don't think that it kept her warm, except for perhaps the fear she may have had of maybe losing 1 or 2 of these diamonds as she sloshed them around walking along the red carpet. Amazing piece. So here, to show the best I could from the diamonds, I photographed them on a dark background. And I did the same, but on a mannequin here. This is an incredible collection of emeralds. And anyone who's a gemologist will immediately recognize what a challenge it was for Muawad to collect a suite of emeralds that matched in color to compose this incredible suite that you see right here. So I photographed this on dark and I liked it best, but I photographed it on glass, and that allowed me to bring in different kinds of backgrounds underneath the glass. So I could determine later, once I had everything on my computer, so what I liked best. I still like the one on the left best. Maybe you like the one on the right. Somehow the emeralds maybe look a little brighter on that one. But I'm not crazy about the distraction of the texture you see below it. It looks like a tweed or herringbone jacket that you might buy somewhere, but it's not. Ultimately, the biggest challenge we have is photographing a magnificent single stone. And I think really for the photographer has to try to bring together everything. He has to bring, or she has to bring in the idea of reflection, refraction, transparency, color, contrast with the background, shadow or no shadow. All of these are the things that we're trying to bring together in a single photograph. That is the challenge of the photographer. And so we're going to conclude my talk right now. And I just want to cue you in on this real quickly. Here's a tiger. It's also cut by the same lady that we saw the last labradorite on, but hey, it's a labradorite. What happened to the color? There you go. There's a little bit of labradorescence for you. Thank you so much for attending today. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock now, wherever you are, I hope it was a good one. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Robert. That was really fascinating. Thanks for sharing all your tips and everything with us. We've got some really good questions. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I think everybody was so engaged with your talk. There was a lot of really good feedback and questions. So the first one that I thought was interesting was you talked about using f-stops, different f-stops. And there were several questions about what's the best f-stop to take the picture at. And there were some questions about is f22 going too far with the f-stop? Will you have deflection or loss of sharpness with using a f-stop f22?
That's it's a good question. It's a very technical one. So reciprocity failure is something that happens if you close your f-stop down too much. You actually begin to not have sharpness in your image, and particularly in digital photography. So I don't use the maximum on either side. I never use the 2.8 aperture on one end, and I don't use the f22 or f29 on the other, or f32. I think on the 105 it's f32. I don't go that far. I generally take a picture right at around f22 to 25. It's the sweet spot for that lens. I get the greatest sharpness there with it. If I don't get enough sharpness, I can always refer to a stacking mechanism where you take a picture at different focal points and then stack them together in Photoshop to create one very sharp image. Now, with regards to stacking though, I don't particularly like it. I like a little bit of an area where it's somewhat out of focus. To me, that gives a greater sense of depth, and the image looks a little less flat. Now, I know that's sacrilege to a lot of people who are stacking images, and that's fine, but I do stack them myself sometimes, but not as much.
Great. Another question was, you showed these beautiful labradorites with the paintings on them, and you use that to sort of make the point of using different lighting environments. And we had some questions about could you go into a little more detail of differences, when you showed just the stone without the labradorescence? How did you change the light to make the labradorescence come out?
Ah, good. That's a secret. No, just kidding. No, imagine a piece of labradorite in your hand. You're going to move that labradorite around until you catch the labradorescence. Or you will move the light around until that labradorescence shows. So in the first picture, I really wanted to accentuate the painting and not the labradorescence. Although to me, it's total magic when both of them come together. But the first picture of the fish, for example, really shows the fish against a darker background. There's no labradorescence showing, so they're more accentuated. You're really looking at the painting. But then when you realize that the stone under it has labradorescence, and you achieve that by repositioning your light, all of the magic comes together. I hope that answered it.
That's great. Here's a question I liked, because I've seen you working out in the field. And so the question is, do you have any mobile photography tips?
You mean push-ups?
I meant more of your photography, but yeah, that's another topic. Do you have any tips for taking really good photos of gemstones or jewelry or whatever out in the field?
Yeah. Well, when I've been traveling with you, Aaron, in Burma, I took with me a very small kit of lights. I actually have one here. I'm going to show everybody. This is a lume cube light. They're very small. You can see it's smaller than my hand. I can hold the whole item. You can buy these through photo supply stores, and they're really excellent because they'll pack into a bag and you can take them into the field. They're battery operated. You have to recharge them, and but they're small, so they'll fit in your suitcase. They'll also fit into a situation where you have a small stage that you're working with, and so they're very helpful that way. And I got a set of maybe, I don't know, I have probably 6 of these. And I can use them by repositioning them all around an item when I'm photographing. And a case in point was a picture I took of a ruby and calcite in Mogok just recently with you. And I was literally lying on the ground on my tummy because there was no table. You guys were using the table, you important guys. And I was lying down on the ground there with the stone on the ground, and that makes me happy because I know that the stone, if it tips over, it's already on the ground. It's a little less dangerous in that kind of a situation. But where I had everything together and then just hand holding the camera because my tripod was way too big for it to take the pictures. We got publication quality images from that moment, so I was very happy with the way those small lights worked.
Yeah, I remember that scene quite vividly, Robert. That's burned in my memory. Here's a softball question for you, Robert. What's the most difficult gem to photograph for you? Maybe it's not such a softball question.
I have to say that those fire obsidians that I photographed recently, I had a group of 20 or 30 of those. To capture that iridescence is incredibly challenging, very, very difficult. And the stones are fairly large, so you have big, broad areas that reflect light from all sides. So to see the color and not see the light reflections that you're using was challenging. But we were able to achieve it. Very carefully positioning the stone on the stage, very carefully tilting it so not to show reflections, and at the same time illuminating it to show that incredible color.
Great. Robert, we could go on for hours, I think, but I think we probably should wrap it up at this point. Thank you so much for presenting this to us today. It was really great.
It was a pleasure.
So everybody else, thank you so much for joining in today. And I hope you can join us next week as well. We'll be joined by Dr. Karen Smith from GIA and Dr. Steve Shirey from the Carnegie Institute in Washington, D.C. And they'll be presenting their webinar, Diamond Ages, Are Diamonds Forever? So please, if you have any other questions, find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And otherwise, we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.